Mhm. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And we've got many of you tuning in from all over the country, indeed, all over the world. And I'm so glad as someone calls me right now. Well, let me just stop this right here. Okay. Mr. Seha, I'm recording right now. Can I call you back? Hello? Yes. May I call you back? Or you can come in the back. Okay, I'm recording though. Okay, bye bye. All right. Well, we're going to start in 15 seconds. I'm in my building and the heat has been not been great.
Let's get some heat on for you.
Well, get it all the way up because I can't take it. But we're up in 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today in this new year. I don't know if I wish my brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, happy birthday yesterday, but I do. I do. I love him, love him, love him. And we now have a new president elect. What will all of that mean? Many people are looking at the billionaires. Indeed, one of our regular panelists said that, I didn't think Donald Trump was going to be able to get to the nomination, let alone become the president. But now I see why they let him back in. He has a minder. He has a babysitter, Elon Musk, who Donald Trump famously quipped. He said he's a guest who won't leave. Wow. So what does that mean, everybody? What role do billionaires play, not just in this administration, but quite frankly, we've seen the oligarchy step forward in ways that make them uncomfortable. In this 2024 cycle, and quite frankly, just in this era, and this gilded age, if you will, we've seen them step forward and be more public than they really normally want to be. People who are in business typically want to be hidden. Indeed, the wealthiest among them, you don't know what the Waltons look like. You don't really know what a Rockefeller looks like. You don't know what the Koch brother, family look like. You don't know them, and they like it that way. Power likes to be obscured unless you are an advocate for the people. So let's talk about what is happening now, because now we're watching inequality continue to grow, and the electorate are responding to it from the right and the left all over the world. Populism is growing and growing and growing from the right and the left. But is it correct? Do we know what we're really fighting? Who we're really fighting? Do we know what we're fighting for? As we look at the H-1B visas, many of us don't look at the Tent Partnership for Refugees. It's the same program. It just gets the so-called unskilled workers at the bottom. We're bringing refugees in who have college degrees and those who have no Ds. And we're having them work for cheap. Essentially, that's what's happening, everybody. And we need to really look at that as we are all fighting. These little brown and black people are coming in at the border. Guess what? They're being brought in. Our own Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, signed a memo of understanding 2 years ago with the creator of Kobani yogurt, creating the Tent Partnership for Refugees, just to bring these people in, to have them work for cheap. Remember, Africans were brought to the United States on the same kind of program. We didn't have citizenship either. Some people get upset when I say that, but remember, we fought the Civil War, but that only served to free us from slavery after a fight in the Senate and in our Congress to get us freed. Then we had to fight for citizenship, then the right to vote. So we've got to look at all this because it seems like we're right here again. And so when I'm looking at these issues, when I'm looking at inequality, equality, freedom, liberty, really one of the most brilliant minds, someone who really helps me to get it, someone who gives me information when I want to get information, real data, and tremendous analysis, brilliant, insightful analysis about where we are in this fight for equality. I go to inequality.org. And I go to Chuck Collins. He is a member of the family here on this show. And so I'm so glad that he is with us. Of course, the director of the Project on Inequality and the Common Good, everybody. Is there a tie between the common good and equality and inequality? Yeah, I want to find that out. And you know what? The Wealth Hoarders, you got to get that book. When you see it, I know I kind of laugh, but I laugh ruefully, Chuck Collins, because I tell you, they are hoarding their wealth and they're getting wealthier. They're getting richer and richer and richer. And we're getting poorer and poorer and poorer and angrier and angrier. And I'm wondering if we're fighting the right fight because we're fighting each other instead of really understanding that these people, they don't have parties, they have power, Chuck. You know, we saw on the Democratic side, they threw out 14 million votes. You know, and the board of directors of the Democratic Party installed a new candidate. Yes, she had to call around. There's no question. I didn't like that Kamala Harris was put in that position, but it is what it is, and that's it. Kind of let us know that Donald Trump was kind of right. The system is rigged. Elizabeth Warren did say it's rigged and it's rigged against us. He said, "Look, I just took advantage of the system as it's constructed. I'm not taking up for him, everybody." Chuck Collins. It's almost as if they hate him because he's giving away the trade secrets. He said, "I don't pay taxes because I don't have to." I mean, Chuck Collins, help me to understand. First of all, I keep hearing people say that we're in a gilded age once again. What was the gilded age, and why are people calling this age another gilded age?
Well, it's great to be with you. Happy New Year. Yes, the Gilded Age, actually, that was a phrase from Mark Twain. He wrote a book called The Gilded Age, and that period, sort of, I don't know, 1880 to 1920, was the last time we had the levels of inequality, the extreme gap between the rich and everyone else. Here we are a century later. But that first Gilded Age really was not a great time, and it was the concentration of wealth and power was at an extreme level, and industries were controlled by one or two kind of dynastically wealthy families. The Rockefellers had oil, and the Carnegies had steel, and there was the meat trusts out there in Chicago, and these dynastic families. So um, and here we are 120 years later. We're kind of what people think of as the second Gilded Age. This is the new chapter of that extreme concentration of wealth. And in 1983, there were maybe a dozen billionaires in the United States. Today, there are 813.
Wait,
And
wait.
they,
Say that one more time. What?
well, there were about a dozen billionaires in 1983, not that long ago, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the growth in billionaires has just been unbelievable. We now have 813 billionaires. Their combined wealth is about $7 trillion. And that's not money, that's power, as you alluded to, the power to shape our Congress, to rig the rules in their favor. You used the word oligarchy, which is a word I think we're going to hear a lot more in the coming couple of years, because an oligarchy is a society ruled by a small handful of wealthy people. And the power allows these folks to capture government, to essentially write the rules or block change. That's a lot how the wealthy use their power. Is you and I might say, great idea, let's raise the minimum wage, or let's do something to help, low income people, something popular, and yet they are able to block the kind of changes and reforms that we want. So the power of the billionaires is kind of what we're living through in this moment. And they weighed in heavily on this election.
Mm-hmm.
And President-elect Trump is rewarding them by filling his cabinet. I think you either have to be a billionaire or a former Fox News host to get a slot in the cabinet. Those are the two largest pools that Trump is drawing from.
We're talking with Chuck Collins, the director. It's from the Institute for Policy Studies. You do such great work there. But inequality and the common good. What is the tie between the common good and inequality, or the common good and inequality? I mean, what is the common good anyway?
Yeah, I think the common good is a society where everyone can thrive, everyone has opportunity, everyone has the tools and access to the tools to have a good life. The American dream, people talk about, retire before you die. You have to work to the last minute. Maybe own a home, leave something for your kids. If you have a health setback, you have a way to heal. A living wage where people don't have to work more than 30, 40 hours a week to have a decent life. The common good is also recognizing we're all in this together. We're an injury to one is an injury to all. And what I think the worst thing that inequality does is it disrupts the common good. It undermines it. It kind of leaves it behind. It makes everybody think, oh, I'm on my own, or what happens to Santita doesn't matter to me. I just got to grab all I can and survive. And, I think I could go down the list and people say, well, who cares about these billionaires? They have all that money. I'd like to be a billionaire. But the problem is a society that funnels wealth to the billionaires is the same society that keeps wages low for, 70% of the population, that keeps people locked out of their opportunity to own a home, keeps the cost of health care and basic needs rising. So inequality harms each of us. I would even argue it harms rich people in the sense that the society begins to pull apart in a way that isn't good for anybody. Now, wealthy people can buffer themselves from the harms. They can move off and live on an island if they want to. But in the end, those inequalities really, really hurt the cohesion, the sense that we're all in it together.
Chuck Collins, it's not very smart to have your workers and the people in your home caring for your children, preparing your food, hate you. One of the untold stories of slavery, you hear slave narratives, and then Black people are an oral people, so you hear what people would call folk tales, but they're not. They just haven't been recorded, or historians shoo away the idea. They say, that could not have happened. But, you listen to people. I'm a descendant of people who were enslaved. And, one of the things that they don't tell you is that slave masters started getting poisoned. They started getting poison in their food, cut glass in their food, ground up glass. I mean, I'm not saying that should happen. I'm saying you have to have you have to really be overflowing with hubris if you really think that you are that safe. Heaven knows I am saddened by the death of anyone, the killing of anyone. And Brian Thompson's death, it hurt me. He was a father, a husband, a son, a cousin, a dear friend, a colleague. He was so many things to a lot of people. And his death leaves a void in a lot of people's lives. That having been said, I said, the way people feel about their health care, for him to be walking by himself in New York City, even at 6:45 in the morning, that to me, Chuck Collins, was not very smart. I mean, I have grown up with security all of my life because my father's in the line of work where, Black leaders of his stature didn't live past 39. So a lot of people were always worried about him, and he got a lot of threats to, for people to really, the worries to be substantiated. But I said, we're living in a time when no one is untouchable. And I get the sense that people are feeling untouchable. I'm not espousing violence. But what I'm saying is we are in a violent society. When people say that this is not who we are, Chuck Collins, this is exactly who we are. And how ironic that you would have a young scion of wealth and a young man who is at the very least highly intelligent, I dare say even brilliant, from a very privileged family, a Republican family at that, which doesn't mean that his politics went in that direction. But he is alleged to have done it. We don't know who he was talking to on the phone. I don't think he was alone. I mean, it's a whole lot. And now you've got titans of that industry running scared. All I mean, because to me that's the common good. When
Yeah.
when assassination, also no one, people were not celebrating the killing of this man, but this was an opportunity for people to say, look, do you know what happened to me? Do you know what United Healthcare did to me? I had stage 4 cancer. My husband, my partner, my wife, my children did it. Now you got a woman in jail with a $100,000 bail she cannot make because she's trying to get a sick child who's desperately ill. She's trying to get them service, and she can't get it. So I need you to help me to understand. I mean, because it is in this context that I've got Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who Elon Musk owns Twitter, X. So he's shaping the narrative. These billionaires own the networks. They own the newspapers that are left. So they're shaping the narrative, and the narrative that they're shaping has the masses fighting each other and not investigating how they attained their wealth and how they sustain their wealth. Because indeed, on the other side of the colon in your book is how these people, the billionaires, pay millions to save their billions. you know,
Yeah.
so help me to understand. I mean, what are we looking at when we see an Elon Musk and a Peter Thiel,
Well,
etc.?
well, I would just echo that. I think the assassination of Brian Thompson was a horrible thing, and it also it unveiled, the violent nature of our society and the powerlessness, I think, that a lot of people feel when it comes to something like as basic as their health care. They're seeing these huge corporations, owned and run by billionaires, uh, squeezing more money out of the existing healthcare system by denying and rejecting people's claims. And all of us have this experience now. If you have the unfortunate experience of having to go to a hospital, have an emergency, have a loved one or family, you get these 6 different bills. You get one from the ambulance and one from the anesthesiologist and one from the emergency, and then your healthcare did. You know, if you have the good fortune to have private health insurance, it's rejected, and you're stuck with thousands of dollars in bills. And there's a sense of powerlessness that people feel, and that's just in healthcare, whether it's housing, going to the grocery store, having a working vehicle, all these stresses that people feel. So I think it was really, and I think, one way to understand that the moment we're living in is that the billionaire class has captured our democracy,
Mm.
um, and wields power, and the government, which could be a countervailing power that could be on the side of ordinary people, is ineffectual. And so you have an Elon Musk, and by the way, Musk, as of today, is worth about $440 billion. It's almost a half a trillion dollars of wealth. That is just unprecedented. We have 15 billionaires who have more than 100 billion each. These are the new gladiators, the powerful kings in our society, and most people feel they have no power in relation to those kings. So I think we're going to see more of those. Unfortunately, I'm not justifying it, but we're going to see more acts of desperation, violence, coming out of a sense of fear and powerlessness. Um, There's
Well, I don't
actually
think you're justified.
yeah,
It doesn't feel like you're justified.
explaining,
I think you're trying to
explaining.
explain, yeah, what is happening, because we just came through this 2024 campaign, and I've been following you in interviews, and the question that keeps coming up over and over and over again is, how did we go from price gouging, which was a message that was working for Kamala Harris, but her oligarchical funders told her, don't touch that, even though your commercials to this point are going through the roof. Don't touch this because this is going to kick back on them. So she had to pivot to joy and celebrity endorsements, which, oh my gosh, that's it. That is in part what really it her, addled her. I'll just put it that way, because
Yeah,
there are many different reasons. A lot of people, more people were not inclined. They dug in their heels on President Trump than than dare admit.
yeah,
He's far more popular than people want to say. He's extremely popular with white people. Has a growing popularity with black people. He does, including black women, but he's far more popular with black men, Latino men. I mean, and there's a reason that he's appealing to these folks, and to a lot of people, because he'll say things that with which a lot of people can agree, because now he's been put in the position of fighting the power, which everybody's angry about. you know?
right.
So I mean, how do you go from I have a viewer and listener who said, look, I was at Walgreens a couple of days ago and I paid $8 for a dozen eggs. This is a very real experience, Chuck Collins.
Yeah,
But I had President Biden first for the past 4 years telling me, yeah, things are bad, but you have to look at it another way. I'm like, I don't have enough money in my debit card to buy my groceries. What do you mean? How can I look at this another way? Help me to understand the disconnect here.
yeah. I mean, I think the election was weird in the sense that people were feeling pain. They had feeling an affordability crisis and wanting to know who's on their side.
Mm-mm.
And I think the big Democratic Party donors, like you said, Santita, sort of discouraged candidate Harris from playing the populist card. She didn't come out swinging. She didn't say, "I'm going to fight for you, working people, taking on the insurance industry, taking on, the big grocery companies that are gouging you." I mean, she did say that, and she was encouraged to sort of back off from that kind of line.
No,
And
she was told,
yeah, yeah,
you got to stop this.
yeah,
It might be working with the masses, but it's not working with the classes.
yeah, yeah. So in a Trump, I don't think this would have played out in almost any other historic moment. Trump was able to say, "I'm on your side," and convince a lot of people who, over the last 4 years, didn't feel like the Biden-Harris administration really sort of addressed their underlying pain. And if you are in pain, you're going to look for whoever's going to appears to be listening to you. Now we know in reality, Donald Trump is not going to make the lives of working precarious folks better.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of symbolic actions. There's going to be a lot of, okay, symbolically, I'm going to stop those immigrants at the border. And symbolically, I'm going to eliminate the taxes on tips. That will be the thing that Trump will talk about while they push through an extension of the 2017 tax cut, which mostly is a giveaway to the billionaires and the ultra rich. So he's going to pretend to be the champion of ordinary people, but in fact, it's not going to make conditions better. And so, a couple of years from now, maybe the pendulum will swing again because nobody is really addressing that underlying pain. But in the meantime, we've elected the candidate of the powerful oligarchs. He's really, he's going to come out of the first regulating the energy economy
Mm-hmm.
and working to cut taxes for the rich. And those are the two main interest groups that got him elected, and he'll kind of do a lot of symbolic uh, things that actually aren't going to really make things better. So I think, and that's the hard thing to explain to people. I mean, I also have lots of friends and family who cast their vote in different ways. Now, even before he's been elected, they're starting to have second thoughts like, wow, I'm not sure this is really going to work out for me. This isn't going to necessarily improve my life. That's the reality.
Well, what do you suggest that we do? Because it seems like we're caught between the horns of a dilemma. Um, you have someone who was talking about, helping you to jumpstart your businesses. Um, there were some good things in her plan. Now, mind you, she was, Gaza was a big issue, and it's understandable. You have people who have relatives. Congresswoman Tlaib's grandmother is in the West Bank. I mean, I can't tell you when you've got bombs raining over your grandmama. I just lost mine within the past 10 years. That I'm not going to tell you that you don't have the right to be demanding and pushing. I'm not going to say that. That said, let's be honest, Chuck Collins, the billionaires, the bankers, that is what Senator Durbin said when we had the banking crisis in 2008. He said, look, let's be honest, the bankers run the place. They kind of run everything. So what are we to do just, I don't even care if it's from the right or the left, from the correct, because you have a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, which is very interesting because you have some very wealthy people who are a part of this. But first of all, explain what it is that the group is and what it is that these wealthy individuals see.
Well, the patriotic millionaires are people with a lot of wealth, but they're very concerned about the direction of the country. They're concerned about what you and I are talking about, great inequalities of wealth and power, and how that is really bringing us to the brink of kind of a societal breakdown. And they pretty much stand up there and say, people who are in the patriotic millionaires, their members, say, tax us more. We should pay higher taxes. And they've seen how much taxes have gone down for themselves and for people in that top 1%, the top 1/10 of 1%. So they're speaking out for tax fairness. They're speaking out for higher wages for low wage workers. And they're speaking out to reduce the influence of money in politics. So you would say that, okay, maybe they're not speaking out in their self-interest, but as their chairman, Morris Pearl, would say, actually, it's in my self-interest to live in a society that doesn't have these grotesque inequalities of wealth. And it's in my interest to know that my neighbors and people that work in my office are okay. They're able to live and have decent lives. So the patriotic millionaires are kind of unusual in that way, but they're not alone. I think there are a lot of people, there's even probably a handful of billionaires who sort of see like, whoa, do we want to keep going down this path where we're just going to keep pulling apart as a society? And one thing about inequalities, it sort of inflames all the existing divides that are there. Urban, rural, the racial economic divide. It's sort of these inequalities supercharge the existing divides in our society, and that's poisoning the well for all of us. And that's where a group like the Patriotic Millionaires, and they're not alone, are saying we should pay more taxes. What we've seen is taxes on the rich have been so dramatically reduced that ordinary working people are paying more at the state and local level, paying more in sales taxes, feeling the squeeze. And that leads to resentment. But who do they blame? They blame local government, not the people who have rigged the tax rules. So you ask the question, what is it we can do? I sort of have to say, how would we recognize a candidate or a sitting politician? How do we know they're on our side? How do we know that they're really going to stand up for me? And I would say, well, How about raising the wage floor, the minimum wage, which hasn't been raised since 2009? The tipped minimum wage, right? If you work in a restaurant and you're in a state that doesn't have a higher tip minimum wage, it's $2.13 an hour still. Now Donald Trump will say, well, you don't have to pay taxes on your tips. Well, how about just raising the floor, the wage floor? How about another indicator? Are people able to save? And is the home ownership rate going up? Right now, it's going down. It's going down for every group, racially and economically. So are we turning the corner? Are more people able to own a home? Can you afford to have the basic health care? The squeeze is on. So I think we need to be able to have kind of ways of holding elected officials accountable for making real changes, not symbolic changes.
How do we get there though? Because you now have people who are saying, and I think rightly, all protectionism to me is not bad.
Right.
I don't want there to be xenophobia and various forms of racism. It's just all the classism, you got to take it out of it, right? But somehow or another, that in America, we think we're classless, but that's not true. I mean, how do we make things right? Because it seems to me that is, how do we all know? I mean, how do you get the people who they put their money into the system, and so they really essentially have their hands on the levers of power.
Yeah.
How do you help them to understand that it is to your advantage? It is your advantage for you not to. I mean, what the divide between what workers and CEOs have been paid since the '60s has just exploded. What has changed in the culture where people think that that's okay? CEO, you make $1 million a year, okay, that's good. But you have a middle class people who are able to send their kids to school. I mean, I live in Chicago, so Illinois, Michigan is just to the north of us, and you saw such a robust, solid middle class there. I mean, of all races,
Yeah.
people were able. I mean, you were able to build some of the best schools in the world there, and you left on the assembly line. That's over, and we've outsourced all of these jobs. And so now, as we look at H-1B visas, we're getting angry with India. But no one wants to look at how Tesla laid off all these workers. And he wants to bring in H-1B workers. I never thought I'd live to see the day on Chuck Collins when white men would be called lazy and shiftless.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that has happened. Help me.
Yeah.
How do we? Because this man has the president's ear, and he also is controlling the discussion on X.
I mean, the importance of you having a program where we can even have conversations about this issue is critical, because and people need to support and listen to their independent local media, because right now we're living in a parallel universe of information. You can listen and watch Newsmax and Fox and track certain YouTube videos, and you basically can live in a parallel world to the one you and I see every day. So, encouraging people to see and listen to other forms of information. Right now, unfortunately, you have one of the ways the oligarchs, the billionaires, use their power is they buy up media and they limit what's on the menu. So that's one thing, is just celebrating and affirming independent media that isn't controlled by billionaires, media that doesn't just see its role as to serve the wealthy and serve certain industries. And I think I agree with you. And President Biden worked to make more things in America, make it in the US. we don't necessarily have to import as much of our basic economic lives as
Mhm.
we are. And we have the ability to do that. So certain amount of protectionism, protecting certain domestic industries, I think also makes sense to me. But imposing tariffs on imports that are going to be kind of like basic needs for a lot of people is essentially a tax on workers in the United States. Will they understand that? I don't know. It depends on what media they're listening to, I suppose.
It
Um,
does. But what about the loopholes? I mean, because Trump did say, well, yeah, you're right. I don't pay taxes because the tax code is built for me. Chuck Collins, he didn't lie.
no,
I mean,
we have to unrig the tax code. The tax code is rigged. The richer you are, the more people you hire to make use of, find all those loopholes for you or create some new ones for you. So yeah, we're in a situation where, and the first thing that the Republicans are going to do when they come in is they're going to dismantle the funding for the IRS,
mhm.
because the IRS has finally, in the last couple of years, got the capacity to track down and chase the tax cheats and make sure the wealthy pay their fair share and don't keep shifting tax responsibilities onto the rest of us. And one of the first things that's going to happen is they're going to eliminate that enforcement capacity. That should be a red flag for the rest of us that this government is doing everything it can to help its rich friends, and they're going to knock on the president's door and say, "Oh, my business needs an exemption from those tariffs." Oh, sure, if you're my friend and supporter, there's going to be an exemption. So there's going to be this kind of crony capitalist odor around how these policies get implemented, and
Well,
they're basically not going to help ordinary people.
I mean, because we're seeing like a concentration. I mean, look at and you see this quite frankly with every inauguration, but we're talking about it more now. I think because many of us feel that it's happening, that this is unique, and it's not, unfortunately. But when you look at the list of the people who are donating to the inaugural festivities. And I think we should look at that every inauguration, everybody, because
Yeah.
this is kind of sort of how this thing works. Um, but you see, what I can look at Amazon, for example. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Everybody doesn't read the Washington Post, but everybody in Washington reads the Washington Post. I read it because I went to college there, and it was kind of like a habit in my home before I even went to college. You read the Washington Post. It's the paper of record for the powerful, along with the New York Times. He owns it.
Yeah.
Um, but guess what? When you go to Amazon, there are things that I cannot find on the shelves at the store. Chuck Collins, I literally held my phone, and I'm like, I can't find this product. I go to Amazon, it's right there,
Yeah.
and I press a button, and it can be in my place maybe at the end of the day or in the morning, because it's like they're hoarding wealth, they're hoarding products, they're hoarding everything. I mean, that's just them.
Yeah. I think, Santita, what you're saying, one thing is to follow the money. Who pledged $1 million to the Trump inauguration?
Who did?
Amazon, Bank of America. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, personally wrote a check. General Motors, Goldman Sachs, Uber, Pfizer Pharmacy, OpenAI, Meta, Facebook, basically.
Mhm.
They're all ponying up $1 million at least to support the inauguration. They're kissing the ring. This is a pretty this you're right in that we've seen this before, but we're seeing it at a whole other level
Mhm.
of sort of corruption and capture. And as your listeners go through their day, we need to say, what's it like to live in an oligarchy? Who controls the news? Who controls your food prices? Who decides what you have to pay to have a to get your pharmacy needs met? Just down the list. The billionaires are nickel and diming and extracting wealth from every step of our day, from every part of our budget. The fact that you can't get the thing that you want at your local store, um, and that Amazon has this power in the marketplace. It's not about resenting people for money. It's not about resenting them because they have more wealth. It's that they're wielding their power in a way that undermines and worsens the rest of our lives. And that's hard to understand sometimes, but that's what we're living through.
Yeah, I mean, and now they're talking about colonizing space. I mean, the thinking, when Jeff Bezos says that one day visiting Earth will be like visiting an amusement park, I'm like,
Huh.
so
Yeah.
what does that mean? That we're not going to be alive? I mean, well, what are you talking about? So you all you've got SpaceX, Mr. Musk, and you're going to go to Mars, and we found water there. We found, you can,
Yeah.
what are you, and that goes to the common good to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't, because you're not, I am just, my Bible tells me that, we have stewardship over the earth.
Yeah.
And when you have stewardship, you're supposed to be responsible. And but that's not what's happening here. I see these people on a very destructive course.
Yeah.
And I think whenever I look at your reports, that's what I see. Dr. King talked about it. And he said, we are headed towards spiritual death.
Yeah.
Because we worship materialism, militarism, racism shapes our lives, and it's misshaped all of us.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the new idolatry. And one thing that having extreme amounts of wealth, I'm not talking about having $1 million or 10 million. I'm talking about, 40, 50 million, all the way up to the billionaires, is you sort of opt out of the traffic jams of life. You kind of get to pop in your helicopter and fly over them. And of course, we all kind of, oh, wow, wouldn't that be nice? I'm stuck in the traffic jam of life. But wealthy people opt out. And when you hear the wealthiest people on the planet talking about, let's make Mars, let's become a multi-planetary species, just remember, they're not talking about bringing us along. I don't think there's a seat for us.
Not unless I'm serving on the ship.
And yeah, exactly. Maybe how many of the pilots and flight attendants get to come along, but there's not that many. So we're going to be left behind. And that is the counter to that stewardship impulse. We only have this one precious planet Earth, and it is extraordinary, the gift that we have been given. And it's not surprising that the richest 1%, the richest 1/10 of 1% really, are the biggest trashers of our planetary environment. They're the ones flying the private jets, the super emitters. They're the ones powering these yachts, which are just huge polluters. They have huge houses that they don't even occupy. That they're burning up our atmosphere, and no wonder they're saying, "Oh yeah, let's look into rockets to Mars," because they think, "Oh, we're just going to trash this planet. We're going to go find another one." That's not an inclusive option.
Yep, it's frightening though. I mean, and you wrote in inequality.org, which I comb my email to find out what you've written. I mean, I do it daily. I'm like, somebody's got to help me to understand this.
Yeah.
And you talked about one thing that might surprise people, the rich in 2025, but boom, if they don't get richer. How could that happen? And what would their own revolution look like? Because I think they would revolt. I think they would.
I mean, a lot of people gave, you look at the big oil, gas, and coal industry, some of the big sectors that back Trump, they are expecting a huge return on their investment. They are anticipating that their wealth is going to grow. And actually, we're going to track that. In fact, we're tracking 15 of the biggest fossil fuel funders, donors to Trump. And we're going to watch to what happens to their personal wealth. We anticipate that it's going to just skyrocket in the coming months.
Well, wait. You said Tim Cook?
Tim Cook from Apple wrote $1 million personal check.
Why is that important that he wrote a personal check? I mean, because, I mean, please, I just that hit me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he didn't feel it as a company, Apple should, give to that, but he personally was sort of buying protection. Um, the CEO of Uber, Derek Karashashi, also wrote a personal check. So they're all chipping in as kind of protection money. The that Jeff Bezos, during the first Trump administration, he was the owner of the Washington Post. I read Marty Barron who was the editor of the Post, wrote a really interesting book called Collision about Bezos, Trump, and the Post. And he said Bezos pretty much didn't pull any strings editorially, didn't tell the newspaper what to do, and actually backed it being kind of an independent investigative force in watching the Trump administration and Trump's actions. And Trump never forgot that. He just always said, "Oh yeah, this is the Bezos Amazon-owned Washington Post." He always attacked it. Trump could never understand that the idea that maybe somebody might view a newspaper as kind of a public trust, the way the Sulzbergers do at the New York Times. They're it just doesn't compute for him because everything you do is to advance your own self-interest, his worldview. But so Bezos is now worried about. Bezos paid dearly for that. He didn't get government contracts under Trump. He was attacked viciously. So you can understand. Well, maybe these guys are worried. Even though they're billionaires and there's really nothing for them to worry about, they worry that their businesses will suffer from a vindictive, angry president, and that's what they're trying to buffer themselves from. But boy, you got to worry when people kind of, how do they call it, and obey in advance, anticipate, kind of that they're just going to have to be subordinate and subservient to Trump, and you have to worry about the news industry, and Mark Zuckerberg saying, Facebook Meta is no longer going to do fact checking. And Trump saying, "Oh, that's because I was going to put him in jail." They're all living in fear of retaliation, and we could use some spines out there. We could use some Santita Jacksons and a few other folks who are, let's not be afraid. What are they going to do? Put me in jail? I'll go if that's the kind of society we're living in, where we have to go to jail to stand up for basic human rights. Then
So
as Martin Luther King, put me in prison,
Well, I mean, I look at, I remember in the spring of 1980, President Carter had become so unpopular that by that fall, my father was his chief surrogate, if you can imagine then, that you have probably the most prominent Black leader in the country had to go on the road for him. Never will forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And my father had told me the spring of 1980, he said, he is becoming, he had just spoken with him early one morning. And he said, he's a very decent man. He said, baby, I don't know if he's going to win. It's not looking good for him. And this was like May.
Yeah.
1980.
Yeah.
And those of us who remember, because I couldn't vote then, but I was, very politically aware. And I just knew that with Ted Koppel, building this juggernaut called Nightline every night, counting down the hostages, it wasn't looking great for him. He said, but he said, he's a decent man. And I think his presidency will be much more, his post-presidential life will be far more consequential than what we've seen.
Yeah.
And so he might end up, he said it. I mean, he saw it. He said, I think we're going to see what a decent man he is. And he will become the most beloved former president that we've ever had. And I think my father, he saw something. He saw it. And, and that's why when you see one or two CEOs who say, instead of leaving all of this firm to my children, I want to leave it to the workers. I'm not saying you have to do all of that, but there has to be some sense, which is what I get from you. Because you look at the forest and the trees, and the weeds. That's what I appreciate about inequality.org. Because you also help me to understand who these CEOs, who the oligarchs are. Because we've only used oligarchs in reference to Russian millionaires and billionaires. We act like we don't have an oligarchy right here. In Chuck Collins, we do have wealth hoarders here who spend millions to save billions.
Yes.
They're right here. They're here. That's the name of his book, by the way, everybody. I'm going to continue to slip it in because you've got to get the book, because you've got to see these. Because the wealth that they're hoarding and the wealth that is growing, it's absurd, particularly when you see just how desperate Americans are becoming, Chuck Collins.
I think in some ways it's right that you kind of ended by thinking about President Carter's legacy, and I would say that decency as a principle, he really embodied that idea of a common good. He understood, and that is the American values. They're under this. We got to remember that a lot of people get up every morning and they don't think, how can I get more for me? They think, how can I live okay and support my neighbors? They're business leaders who make decisions every day not to squeeze their customers more or, but to serve. There are servant leaders out there, people like your father and others who sort of see their role as to lift up and build a good society. And that is, we will find our way. We're kind of we're taking a potentially very harmful detour, but hopefully we'll find our way back to the common weal and the common good.
I think we're seeing that with our young people, Chuck Collins.
Yes, I agree.
Because I think they've broken the two-party system. They're not afraid to look at aspects of socialism. Although, Wall Street, they socialize their losses, but they privatize their wins. They see that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are saying, you know what? A 40-hour work week? No, maybe we need to go to a 4-day work week.
Yep.
I want to have a life.
Yeah.
I see us moving. I think the young people who are way behind us, they're looking at a different world. I look at my nieces and nephews and my godchildren, and they look at they were wondering, why is Kamala Harris running with Liz Cheney?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Liz Cheney voted with Trump 89% of the time.
Yeah.
She didn't disagree with him. She was upset with him because he took out the establishment Republicans. That I told, these young people that I said, this is personal. And what's personal to me is not really being able to go to the grocery store because people are following you.
Yeah.
Because they're desperate. I can afford to go to the grocery store. So many of us can't. Please give us a word, because you do have a book coming out. And I can't wait for it to come out. So I'm not gonna jump ahead of you, but I cannot wait for it to come out. But I do encourage everyone to get the wealth hoarders, because you really do need to look at, I think you need to really understand what we're in. We need to understand what we need to fight for instead of fighting each other. Please close this out, Chuck Collins. Just moving forward into 2025 and beyond, many people are feeling helpless.
Yeah.
Some people are feeling hopeless. And I think that this is a time for us to organize.
I agree. And, a lot of young people sometimes feel like, well, I don't have a lot of power, but I can create a community. I can create mutual aid in my local community. I can care for my friends and neighbors and family. I think that's a good impulse, but I think we may be called in the coming year and years to resist some pretty awful stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think just to remember, we're work for the common good. Beware of the billionaires, beware of the billionaire controlled media, beware of some of the law changes that will be happening. be able to sort out the distractions and the deflections and the symbolic actions from what's real. Pay attention. Don't withdraw into sort of entertainment or just private life. Hang in there. We got to hang in there. A couple of us have formed like coffee clatch. Every Monday morning, getting together, reading the newspaper, trying to figure out what to do together. What do we need to show up? Where do we need to resist? Where do we need to use our voices? So find your people, find your coffee clatch or your group of people, and work together. Don't be isolated. Don't face this alone. I think that's part of what the challenge will be in the next 4 years.
Well, what did Mahalia Jackson sing? Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and then the walls came tumbling down.
That's right.
You've got to resist. You've got to resist. You've got to resist. And you've got to resist whether this bipartisan betrayal comes from the right or the left. Because the oligarchs control both parties.
Yeah.
We just don't fall into that. Just really please go to inequality.org. And so you can see, the petulant plutocrat of the week that will kind of make you smile, really. And you need to see these charts and really understand that there's some people out here who are working and who really see what's going on. And when you are armed with the information, everybody, you are empowered. We have the power. This government rules by our consent.
Yeah.
Chuck Collins, all we have to do is say no and resist.
Do not cooperate with illegitimate authority. Yeah.
Come on, that's the obligation. And then guess what? The founding fathers came up with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Teddy Roosevelt said, "It is most patriotic to dissent." And we must resist evil. You must. And if you deny anyone food, clothing, and shelter, and the opportunity to optimize who they are, that's wickedness.
Yeah.
And we won't be blessed for that.
No.
Chuck Collins, The Wealth Hoarders, everybody, may God bless you. Get the book. I can't wait. Well, I'm going to see you before then.
Yeah, I'll see you before then. And
I can't wait for your new book. I can't wait, but I salute the divinity in you.
Yeah, likewise.
May God bless you. And to everybody over here, everybody check us out. We're going to be talking with Bryce Green in the next hour about Gaza and the famine for the people that is being obscured. We got to talk about that. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And, we can do something about it. Inequality.org, everybody. Chuck Collins. Sign up for the newsletter and tell everybody about it. And get the book, The Wealth Hoarders. And you know what? Pass it along. Yeah, pass it along. You're going to love it, really. Blessings to you, Chuck Collins.
Blessings to you. Take care. Thank you, Santita.
God bless you. Bye-bye. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back in just a minute.